Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be doing a player guide on one of the most desired champs of the Marvel Contest of Champions, Mr. Cool as Ice himself, Iceman. We'll be doing a character breakdown of the champ, focusing on pros, cons, abilities, gameplay, my personal thoughts of where to use him, and pretty much anything else I can think of that might help you guys out. So let's get started. One of the biggest pros of Iceman is his Cold Snap ability. The Cold Snap ability not only dishes out some damage, but it also stops evaders. So to understand Cold Snap a little more, there's a couple things you should know. First, if your Iceman is awakened, he has something called Absolute Zero that basically causes Cold Snap for 12 full seconds. During those 12 seconds, he does ice damage, as you can see right there at the red numbers above Spider-Man. And also, opponents cannot evade. So if your Iceman is not awakened, you have to rely on your Special 1 or Special 3 attacks to keep your Cold Snap going. After one of those attacks, your Cold Snap will last 9 full seconds. So evaders cannot evade during those 9 seconds, and also there will be some Cold Snap damage as well. Just be aware that when you're fighting someone like Spider-Man or Nightcrawler, you should spam your SB1, try to keep it up all the time so the character will never evade. When the character is not duped, it is more difficult to get off that first Special 1 if you're trying to do something like stop Spider-Man from evading, because obviously he can evade your Special 1. Another bonus I really like about an awakened Iceman is the ability to put Nightcrawler into swashbuckling mode, which is his attack mode. You have to hit him 4 times like you saw there on his block, which will switch him. If you didn't have Cold Snap going and you try to hit the block 4 times, often Nightcrawler will pop out of that with an evade and then come back and retaliate. There's other ways to change Nightcrawler into swashbuckling mode, but it's very easy to do with Iceman, especially if he's got the Cold Snap going, and then you can just keep on going the whole way. Sometimes it's a little bit difficult to switch Nightcrawler to swashbuckling mode. It's usually when he's not duped. It's just a little bit more hard to actually get him to switch over to his new role. If that is the case, you can still keep on spamming your SB1. As long as the Cold Snap is up, you can't evade, so just keep that in mind. The last couple things about Cold Snap. 1, if your character is awakened with the Absolute Zero ability, your Ice Armor will reform 3 seconds faster. We'll talk about Ice Armor in the next section. Also, you have to be very aware of debuff immune nodes, such as in War on Tier 4 and higher, I believe. If you're on a debuff immune node, your Cold Snap will not work, so there won't be any extra damage and you won't be able to stop evasion, so you really have to watch out for that. The next pro we're going to talk about after his Cold Snap ability is he is a great utility champ in the sense that he is immune to bleed, poison, and incinerate. So being triple immune to poison, bleed, and incinerate basically means you can take Iceman almost anywhere in this game. He's immune to the crazy lines in Alliance questing, normal questing, and in War. Anything that has like caltrops where if you dodge back and you bleed, or a line that has poison while you're just standing there, he's immune to it all. And then there's the champs that he faces, like Mephisto here, who has the Aura of Incineration. Most champs you gotta avoid that aura so you don't take damage. He can just take it. He doesn't take any damage at all, he just keeps on going in. And that goes with other champs too, like Archangel with the poison and bleed. He doesn't have to worry about that. So it's a very, very useful utility. And since we're in the Mephisto fight, I just want to talk about it a bit. Mephisto is like the anti-counter to Iceman. He's actually immune to his Cold Snap, and you're immune to his Incinerate, so you're kind of on even grounds. And also at the very start of the fight, Iceman does not have his Ice Armor, and he never gets it until you do your SB3. Then you can get it back. So just keep that in mind when you're fighting Mephisto, that it's kind of a run in, attack, bait specials, try to get your SP3 back. You won't be doing any Cold Snap damage at all. So the next thing I want to talk about is Iceman's Ice Armor. If Iceman would lose more than 5% of his max health from a single source, his Ice Armor protects him from the blow, reducing the health loss to 5%, and then it shatters. So basically what that's saying is if you take a massive hit from like a Special 3, for instance, perhaps normally that Special 3 attack does 30% damage, you would only take 5% and then your armor would shatter. Then you'd have to wait for your armor to reform again, either through the timer or you can use your SP3 to reset it again. The ice armor also has the ability to protect you from stuns. Basically, if you have your ice armor up and an opponent stuns you, you won't be stunned that time and your ice armor will shatter. So kind of a protection for stun. And then you have to reset it all again by doing your SP3 or waiting out the timer once again. So let's take a look at that in action. I'm going to take some hits purposely here to lose my armor, and then I'm going to get hit by an SP3 to show you the damage I'm going to take when I have my ice armor off. As you can see here, I'm taking some massive damage from Hyperion. And now let's see the same fight again when I have my armor up. So this time around, I'm going to bait out his SP3. There it is there. I have my ice armor up, and I'm going to take the full damage. And as you can see, that little sliver of health that I just lost, that's all I lost from that same damage. So you can see that having the ice armor up is a very nice bonus. So try not to lose it during your battle. So the next pro I want to talk about are the heavy attacks and the special 2. First, the special 2 is the biggest damage dealer of Iceman. You just have to be aware that when you use your special 2, you'll lose your armor. It basically takes your armor and converts it into more damage for your special. So be aware of that after special 2 is done, your armor will be gone and it'll take time for it to reset. So let's talk about the heavy attacks a bit. Basically, when you're using Iceman to fight an opponent, every time you do a critical hit, you have a percentage chance to put a frostbite charge on top of the opponent. Also, when you use SB1, that also has a chance to put frostbite charges on the opponent. Frostbite charges basically tick for damage. You'll see that in the red numbers. Basically, if you do a heavy attack when there's a number of frostbite charges, all those frostbite charges will expire at once and you'll do a massive hit. It's a pretty nice bonus, especially if you're trying to end the battle at the very end and you happen to have 4, 5, 6 frostbite charges on. You can do some massive damage, as we're going to see here. So moving on from the heavy attack and the special 2, we're just going to talk about the awakening of Iceman. Is he a good defender? And we're going to talk about the suicide masteries. So the question is, do you want to awaken your Iceman? There's some reasons to do so. One would be definitely for defense. If he's awakened, he gets his absolute 0 for the first 12 seconds of the fight, which means I will take unavoidable damage, as you can see here, unless I have a champ that's immune to the cold snap. It's a very nice ability. Even if Iceman didn't defeat my character, I'd still be taking a lot of damage, and it's very useful in war. The second reason you might want to awaken your Iceman is if you really hate evaders. That first 12 seconds of no evasion is very nice. Without it, you have to basically do your SP1 or your SP3, and sometimes that won't connect on your SP1. So there's some reasons to awaken. Not for everybody. Some people are very content with them without being awakened. And I don't think he definitely needs to be awakened, but definitely a bonus if he does. So next we're going to talk about, is Iceman good for the suicide masteries? And he actually is pretty good, just because he is immune to bleed and poison, which is the negative effect that suicide masteries would give you. The one thing that the suicide masteries will give you is a higher percentage of attack, so you will be doing a lot more damage with your regular hits and your specials. The only problem with suicides, as we all know, is the recoil, and what the recoil does is every time you use a special, you lose 5% of your health, unless that special is a killing blow or an SP3 at the time. I believe the SP3 thing is a bug, but it's been around for a long time. So it's kind of a hit or miss if you want to do that. You got to remember, when you're fighting champs like Spider-Man, where you want to use your specials, you'll be taking some extra damage from the recoil. Suicides aren't for everybody, but definitely being immune to poison and bleed, he makes a very good candidate for suicides. So now we're going to get into some cons. We're just going to do some quick talk about them. The first one would have to be, sometimes he's a little light on damage. He's pretty good. He's an average champ for hitting power, but when you get up there in the higher tiers, like against a Medusa and on a debuff immune node, he'll time out. He just doesn't have the damage. So that's why I can kind of see why some people have brought him to 565, just to give him that extra boost, and also why people might have considered suicides. Still a great champ, still hits pretty hard, just not a super hard hitter. So the next con is kind of a funny one. He's not immune to Cold Snap. He's immune to his own Cold Snap, but if you go up against another Iceman with your Iceman, you still take the frostbite damage at the beginning of the fight if the character is awakened. You still take frostbite damage if you get hit by an SB1. So it's kind of unusual that a man of ice is not immune to other ice, but that's the way things work in the game sometimes, so what can you do? The next con would have to be debuff immune nodes. Basically, when I first awakened Iceman, it was because I wanted to stop evaders like Spider-Man and Nightcrawler and so forth. But as I progressed in the game and got into harder content, such as moving to the Alliance Wars Tier 4 and moving into higher end event quests, sometimes you bump into nodes that have debuff immune, so you can't place any debuffs on the opponent. So people will put a Spider-Man, for example, on one of these debuff immune nodes, and your Cold Snap will not work, so you cannot stop his evading. So it kind of diminishes him a bit. He's still an amazing champ, and that's not going to happen a lot, but just be aware of that people love to put evaders on debuff immune nodes and wars just because they know you're going to bring an Iceman, so keep that in mind. And lastly, the constant buffs can cause power gains in some special nodes. This is basically for the more higher end tiers. For instance, like the Spite node in Alliance War, when you have a buff up, the opponent gains power. Since Iceman always has a buff up with his armor, these sometimes can be difficult. Also, the Cold Snap is a debuff, and sometimes you have the opposite, where if the opponent has a debuff, they gain power as well. So you have to kind of deal with the buffs, with the good and the bad. But all in all, that doesn't happen a lot, and it's more on the high end side of things. So keep that in mind as well. So to sum up on the Iceman player guide, Iceman is an amazing champ. He just has so many things going for him. Bleed immune, poison immune, incinerate immune, amazing armor, stops evaders, great on paths that have bleed and poison, great attacker in a war, pretty good defender in war. You know, he just has it all. He doesn't have the hugest hitting power, but it's still pretty good. He's definitely worth a 455 5-star, duped or unduped in my opinion. I'd even say that he'd make a wonderful 565. Some people probably won't agree with me with that, saying, you know, stick to Blade and Hyperion and Medusa and so forth. But if you already have those characters, you know, Iceman would be awesome as a 565, and I've considered it myself. Definitely as a 4-star, rank him up to 550. He definitely deserves it. He's a great character, one of my favorites, and I hope you guys enjoy the guide. Please leave comments and likes and dislikes and subscribe to the channel. I appreciate everybody that subscribes to the channel, and we'll talk to you soon, and take care everybody.
Target identified. Analysis complete. Please subscribe.